I'm back with David Benedictus. This is number 4. David, go ahead and tell me about your life at the BBC.
Well, before I tell you about my life at the BBC, I'll tell you about the first job I got on my return from my year in Iowa, which means that I would have been 20 years old, I guess. And I had a phone call from a woman called Miriam Rothschild, except that she went under the married name of Miriam Lane. So when she said, "This is Miriam Lane," I didn't know who I was talking to. And she was looking for a tutor. Oberon War had been her tutor, or the family's tutor. And Oberon, I think, had taken to drink. I better not say that. Oberon War had...
Well, he's long gone.
Yes. And she wanted me to go and be interviewed. They lived in Elsfield, just north of Oxford, in a rather gloomy house that John Buchan had lived in, overlooking Oxford. And I didn't know, and I still to this day don't know, how she got my name or why she got my name as a possible tutor. Somebody must have mentioned me to her, I suppose. But she was delighted when she found out that I was Jewish. Obviously she hadn't known from my name, and that was good news. And the interview for the job of teaching primarily her real son Charles, but also lots of other children who kind of accumulated around her, some of them her own, some of them adopted, some of them borrowed. One of them was borrowed from the local school, for instance. But my principal job would be to teach Charlie, who was 12.
Were you living in?
Absolutely. And Charlie was about to sit his common entrance examination, which was how you got into a public school, of course. And there was no question, certainly not in my mind, that Charles would have no problem. And in fact, he was so clever that he turned out to be the youngest ever Fellow of All Souls College in Oxford.
Wow.
And there was nothing I could teach him. It was a little embarrassing sometimes, because if I was trying to teach him...
What were you meant to teach him?
Oh, everything, a bit of everything, really. Classics, maths, French, writing, whatever. He was a charmer, and when I went for the interview, instead of talking to him or indeed talking to Miriam, I played a game of ping pong with Charlie, best of 3. And Charlie just managed to beat me. They had their own table, of course, so he was well in practice. And Miriam was pleased about that, because she said, well, the Rothschilds like to win, but she said they like to be given a good game, and I had fulfilled that requirement.
How old was Charlie at the time?
I said he was 12.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so I was employed by the Rothschilds to teach Charlie, and I would buy his books at Blackwell's in Oxford, but one of the few luxuries that the family allowed themselves was always to have hardback books. I wasn't allowed to buy him paperbacks, that wouldn't have done at all. I was paid £7 a week, which didn't seem excessive to me. And the food was rather sparse, I seem to remember.
Oh, it wasn't gourmet.
Well, occasionally she would give a big dinner and invite a lot of politicians and people. And that would be fun, because before they arrived, she would take me into her confidence and give me all the scandal on the people who were coming to dinner, which made the dinners a lot more interesting, of course, than they would have been otherwise. They had a lot of pets. They had bush babies everywhere, which would come and, when you weren't expecting it, come and cling onto your neck with their little clammy paws. And they had, although they didn't live excessively, they had several houses. One in Petersham, that's right. They did have a lot of fine artwork on the walls. I mean, Augustus John, that's nothing really, but they would have had a few Van Goghs and things around.
Oh, wow.
And every winter they would go to Wengen in Switzerland for the skiing, and they had a chalet there, and in the chalet next to them was the French family. So on that occasion it was the French and the English families together. French Rothschilds were much grander than the English ones, and I could use their coaches. They had 2 Olympic skiers as their coaches, and they never bothered to go out with the coaches, but I certainly did, because I wasn't very good. And then I went to Israel with them as well, because Miriam and her sister Alix, also a Rothschild, of course, the Baroness Alix. They went over to Israel for the Eichmann trial. And Eichmann was on trial for, he had been the sort of Nazis ADC. He was the organiser. He was the one who kept the records.
The final solution.
Yes. After the war, he had escaped and gone to live in Argentina, as many of them did. And Israel sent the Mossad after him. And they caught him and brought him back to Israel, where he stood trial in a glass booth.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Was it 1962? Something
Yeah, well,
like that?
it would have been about then.
Yeah.
Because I think I joined them in 1960, something like that anyway. Played in the theatre production, played by Robert Shaw. And it was no question that he was going to be hanged or shot. I think he was shot in the end, which I thought was a pity. I could understand exactly why this had happened, but I thought the new state of Israel, founded in 48, not that long before, they could have made a symbolic gesture of forgiveness or mercy or something, but they didn't. So I had been to Switzerland with them, and I had been to Israel with them, and then I came home and wrote my first published book. It was my second novel, actually. And that was all down to a young actress called Sarah Miles.
Oh, yes.
Whom I'd been dating without any success, I have to say. She had been at RADA, and I'd been along to see her perform. I saw her in 6 Characters in Search of an Author, as one of the drama school's public performances. And Sarah asked me what I thought of her performance. And I said, well, I thought you were fine, Sarah, but you mustn't stand with your hands in front of your crutch like that. She was very upset. Later on, I saw her give what I thought was her best performance at Worthing Rep, where she played St. Joan in Bernard Shaw's play. Anyway, I didn't get beyond first base with Sarah because she was having it away with, among many others, Laurence Olivier, Nicole Williamson, and you name it, Robert Fox, and goodness knows. Anyway, she did have a boyfriend whose name was Anthony Blonde, who just started out as a publisher.
Ah, yes.
And Sarah said to Anthony, if you're looking for an author, I've got this friend, and he's writing a novel about his time at Eton. And so Anthony sent for me, and he took me out to lunch, and I gave him a copy of the first novel I'd written, which was about America. It was a satirical novel, 90 chapters each in a different style. No one was ever going to publish it. And his first words to me were, in his office in Doughty Street, his first words were, well, of course you realise we can't possibly publish this, pointing at my work, which I hadn't realised. But he said, what I'll do there, if you're writing a satirical novel about Eton, because it turned out he was an old Etonian too, he said, what will your views be? And I said, well, I didn't like it at all. I thought it was cruel, and I thought it was snobbish. And oh, he said, well, that's good news, because that was the sort of novel he thought he could publish. And so I wrote it, and every 3 weeks I would meet him and his partner, Desmond Briggs, and I would read them, the chapters I'd been writing, and he would ask for me to sauce them up a bit, a little more sexual material they'd have been delighted with. And so I finished it, and he published it on the 4th of June, which was the title of the book, and it caused a considerable stir, partly because Ian Fleming in the Sunday Times had taken half a page to review it and had said it was the most brilliant first novel since the war.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, David, we're going to end there, and then we'll continue on afterwards.
Okay.